call the July 8th, 2020 Broker Responsibility Work Group meeting to order. And I guess we have a quorum, just minus Soker.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, and then Amber, are you going to do the minutes, or do we need to go over, are there any corrections?
Yes, I'm going to take notes, and we're going to be recording the meeting. We are recording the meeting now, and then I will take note of any motions that are made, and I will put them in the written form. The minutes from the last meeting were emailed to you a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, with the written portion, and the video has been up for a while. So if anybody had any changes to the written portion, we could discuss those.
Does anybody have changes? Nope. Okay, I guess if there are no corrections, the minutes are approved. Are there any public comments on a non-agenda item?
And we didn't receive any.
Okay.
Unless someone's present on the call, which I don't think so.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the first item, being what balance should be struck between education and experience.
Are we going to talk about the real before we dive into the email that was sent this morning? The lady, because she brings up some good points, I think, to start the discussion.
Okay.
Or would you like me to put it on the screen?
Yes, please.
You got me. Okay.
Did anybody not read it? I'm just curious who read it or who hasn't.
Well, I read it.
I read it.
I read it.
Read it.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I guess that's part of the discussion then.
So yes, it goes back to really a lot of experience versus the education and being involved, but at a more of a managerial or supervisor role versus actively in the field.
Yeah, one of the things.
Everybody read it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I think one of the points he was making in there is that acting as a manager in the brokerage, he's gathering a lot of experience, but he doesn't have, in a non-competing role, he doesn't have enough opportunity to get the full 3,600 required points, experience points, by just managing. As I read it, we award 20 points per month of managing experience. 20 times 12, so that's about 240 points per year. You've got to accumulate your points in 4 or of the last 5 years. 5 years of managing, he could only get about 100 or 1,200 points, a third of what he would need. So he's kind of between a rock and a hard spot. He's got lots of other experience and experience that goes beyond the 5 years, previous 5 years. But in his current role, there's no way he can gain the experience points required. That's one of the main points I took out of his letter.
So.
Right. So, Mark, can you give some historical perspective? When it comes to portability, we have. I've heard a number of different things as to why we don't have portability of broker. That we do things different in Texas, and title transfers different in Texas. And I've heard different answers, but from a historical standpoint, when it comes to the general position of, because like in this particular case, I would feel uncomfortable giving somebody a broker's license in the state of Texas who'd never sold a home in the state of Texas, regardless of whether or not he'd managed. But what's kind of the historical perspective of it?
Yeah, you'll get a lot of different answers on that depending on who you ask. Generally, Texas has had kind of higher requirements, and they've thought that no one else is really substantially equivalent to Texas. So, and that's that's probably not unique to our state. There are other states too that feel the same way. And then some of it is considered, and the counter argument is sort of a barrier to entry, is that this is our market and someone's not going to come in and take our market. So you always have that sort of interplay as well. So and right now the portability is kind of a big issue on the federal side involving military and veterans and spouses. But that's kind of it. And there's always been lots of requests, especially in the commercial area, is where you often see a lot of those aren't as much by state.
Gotcha. Because, going back to Brian's story when we met last time, where, due to the fact that he doesn't have a college degree, he was kind of in the same position where it took him forever to get the education points versus it was kind of the flip of the coin here. I think that something needs to be done, but I don't know necessarily that this case is a really great illustration.
I did a lot of research on this prior to this meeting, and there's some states that definitely have reciprocity and some don't, but some states also have it just with a certain number of states that have similar requirements. Like, it's not like across the board we'll let you get a license here if you're licensed someplace else. So they have established a list of who they will take licenses from, but they still have to do testing and education in the new state.
Correct. So I think right now, like this line item, though, it's more of like the college degree versus the experience, right? And then the other one is going to be, I'm just curious to, I guess if we could possibly get a vote on who thinks this has, like, I think we all agree, but I want to make sure that we all agree that this has to change. Like, there has to be a different
When you
way.
say, do you mean the quality or do you mean the education versus experience?
Education versus experience, correct.
Yeah.
Or a combination of both.
Correct. Like, do we all agree that we have to work to change on this?
Mark, this is Bob Jacobs. In this last committee, did we not increase the amount of, I thought we increased the number of hours or points that were given for managerial. I thought there was a vote to that effect. Was that not approved into the rules?
I don't recall that. Denise Sample is on as well from licensing. Denise, if you know that answer and are able to unmute.
Sorry for that delay. I can look into that. I seem to recall that being discussed with the previous iteration of the broker responsibility working group, but just right now off the top of my head, I don't recall what that change was. But if you give me a few minutes, I can look that up while you guys continue.
Thank you.
I know I printed out the requirements, and it just states 20 points per month, maximum 1,200 points.
I have a couple of questions. I mean, when you look at the supplement A, the qualifying experience, right now it has 5 years, which is 12 sales, which is 2.4 sales a year, which to me doesn't seem very much.
Correct.
And I don't know, when you get down below, it doesn't, like if it says exclusive right to sell listings, and then you have closed purchase or sales. So it doesn't always say if it's closed or not, or if they just had the listing, or it doesn't say if it totally went through with the transaction. So I don't know if there's like maybe a way on here to group like closed purchase of sale, and then under that have exclusive right to sell listings, and then buyer or tenant rep agreements, and just document it out that way, because you can get listings all day long. That doesn't mean that you're doing anything with them.
Well, it does state close,
Right.
purchase, or sell, meaning that the transaction had to close.
Right.
Number
Look,
number 4 and number 5 don't say that.
I'm sorry?
Number 4 and number 5 don't say that.
Correct.
Number 7 does. So
But
As one who-
6 is an unimproved lot.
Yeah. As one who recently completed that spreadsheet, I know that I struggled with understanding. I certainly understand what a closed purchase or sale is. For each one of those, I had to have a listing agreement and or a buyer's rep agreement. And I didn't know if I counted both or not. Certainly I had some listings that didn't close, and I knew I was going to count those, and I had some buyer reps that didn't close. I was going to count those. But for a closed sale, do I get the 300 points plus the listing agreement? So I just had some questions about that. It's not as germane to this conversation, but I think there's opportunity to improve the explanation.
To me, 4 and 5 shouldn't be on there.
Right. I mean, I was just thinking like if you could do closed purchase or sale and then right under it, put a exclusive right to sell listings and then buyer or tenant rep agreement being part of that closed purchase or sales, like have a, title and then different categories without more points.
Yeah. So I think there's lots of points about that. What Leslie, you just said is to qualify points, you need to sell 2.4 houses per year for 5 years, which from Trek's perspective, does that qualify a licensee to become a broker who can sponsor other agents or go out on their own? Is that enough experience?
I personally
don't think
do not
so.
think that is enough experience by not even close.
Yeah. So
Sorry, Brian. I think the reason this came about too is I've been at this a long time, that there for a while people would get their salesman's license, hold their salesman's license for 2 years and take their broker test without selling anything. And I think there's got to be an even match somewhere with that.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the least experienced person who could get their broker's license is somebody who has a bachelor's degree in whatever field of study,
Right.
and they're awarded all of their additional education points. They've got to get their license for 270 hours of real estate related courses, and then they need 30 more hours, and they need to sell 12 houses. So the person who's least qualified with the least amount of qualifications has a bachelor's degree, has sold 12 houses, got their salesperson's license, and then 30 more hours of education.
Right, which is crazy.
It's crazy, I think. But on the other hand, somebody who doesn't have their bachelor's degree has to complete 900 hours of real estate related education. And this form that they're showing on the screen breaks all of that down. So I think there's a real disparity between what we require of somebody who has a bachelor's degree and what we require of somebody who does not have a bachelor's degree.
Especially considering that the bachelor's degree could be in underwater basket weaving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
I worked hard for that.
I like on the screen here, if you could scroll down, because it identifies and clarifies what that additional education can be, coursework can be to qualify for those extra hours. And I'm wondering if somebody who has a bachelor's degree, if they could just get points for or education credit for those sorts of topics or that sort of coursework, and not necessarily get education hours for underwater basket weaving, if that's what the sample was. And I know it's difficult, but I think there's something broken, and I think we have an opportunity to improve it.
I'm gonna say I agree with you, Brian. I think if somebody has college credit that is related to these courses, they should get the credit. But if it's, I don't know, something completely unrelated, as in basket weaving, then why they should not get? It should be more specific, not just bachelor's. You're good to go.
So I'm gonna respectfully disagree.
Okay.
For no other reason than what we're talking about is just a logistical nightmare.
Right.
And I would hate to be in the licensing department of Trek and have to deal with whatever it is that we have to determine this or that or whatever. What I would say is if somebody has a real estate degree, which some degrees in Texas actually have, or some colleges in Texas actually have, then yes, you can have that. But outside of that, everybody has to take the core qualifying education plus an additional X number of hours.
So
And
what about,
and the college degree has no bearing on anything any longer.
so Chance, what about like a finance degree? A finance degree has all of those classes.
But who cares about those classes?
I'm sorry?
I mean, who cares?
So they have to retake all the
I took finance. I mean, I have a business degree. And I'm getting my MBA in entrepreneurship. So I have almost every one of these classes. And at no time in any of those classes did real estate ever come up.
Another question for me, Bob Jacobs, who I think remembers last year. Didn't we just change this to accept this education last year as a way to speed the process into licensing? Or we expanded on it just last year?
I would like to clarify, this is Denise Sample, the Director of Licensing, that we do review transcripts to see currently for someone who doesn't have the bachelor's degree to identify if there's any college courses that were completed that might fall into these course topics that have been approved to award any possible related credit.
And I can imagine that's heavy lifting.
It is. That's one of the most complex reviews of education because it's not already a pre-approved provider and course like with the rest of the qualifying courses.
Right. As an idea, one of the thoughts I had was, I just think that the leg up for a bachelor's degree, regardless of course of study, is a lot. And one idea I had was maybe instead of awarding all of the additional credit, cutting that in half, maybe 300 education hours for a bachelor's degree, and then still requiring that additional real estate related education that others are asked to go through to get the license.
Or what if we did like a series of classes that you had to take to qualify to take the broker's exam? So we have SAE.
Yeah.
So you have to go get 90 hours.
Yeah.
You know, one of the classes that you can select during your SAE is a brokerage class. So what if we had, you had to retake contracts, you had to take the brokerage class, and you had to take one or two other classes, and then that qualified you from an education standpoint.
Yeah. I think that's similar, Chance, to one of the other agenda items, and that is, should we require a mentorship program for broker applicants?
To me, that's so important.
So requiring a broker applicant to go through a mentoring program, which may include the coursework that you're talking about, Chance, to become eligible to test.
I think where I was thinking the mentorship is the broker being required to mentor the agent.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
More so. I think that's really important. And how the wording is now, it just says on the first sale, I believe, and I don't know that people really look at it, and I don't know that or for the first time is really defined.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
It's agents.
So one of the suggestions, and just to throw it out there, that I had on the education versus experience, kind of what Chance was saying, what if we kept what we have where they can get credit, because technically it is being looked at, but for the people that are, let's say, I don't know, just out of college, a year in real estate that can take those 12 transactions and be done. Well, how many years do we need to be in order to apply for a brokerage license? 5 years, right? 4 years. 4 years. So for those people have more experience, and then for people require a higher amount of experience, a higher amount of contracts. And for somebody like Brian, who doesn't college degree, has the the experience to do a more weighted where he gets more points for college credit, even though he doesn't have those classes based on experience. And maybe it goes back more than 5 years.
So let's say we even just leave it within the 5-year period. In that 5-year period when I was filling out the form, I totaled, I'm trying to remember, maybe 45,000 or significant more than the 3,600 that was required. And Jasmine, what I think you're suggesting is maybe take some of those points, maybe for 10,000 points, I can trade that for 50 hours or 100 hours of education and apply that towards my education. And that's an idea that I had shared with Trek, and it might kind of leave the current structure in place, although we might have opportunity to tweak it. But if I could take my 45,000 points and I could trade 40 of those for 400 hours, I think I'd be more qualified as a broker applicant than that person today who has the bachelor's degree, 300 hours and 12 houses.
But that also brings up another question that I'm just gonna throw there. Like, what prevents somebody like from an office to just throw a bunch of deals to be under one person? Like, how would we monitor that? Like, how do we know that you are doing those deals and it's not a team and everybody's just putting them under your name? You know, like, I don't know, I'm posting this question out if we did something like that.
I had that same thing about teams also, because I've been having that issue more lately that people call and say, oh, I need the name changed on the MLS to say it's whoever the team leader is versus who's on the contract. And I don't know how you get around all of the team stuff counting for somebody else or getting to who really did the sale or who represented who.
Well, the broker has to sign off on that. And so somebody would be lying along the way if I'm not, in my company, I've had several people get broker's licenses and I verify whose transactions they are before I put my name to a Trek document. So it's, because I have to verify those things and sign off on them.
Hey, Mark, can I ask you 2 questions?
Of course.
Can we go back to Bob's question from a few minutes ago? Did you just do this qualifying education thing? Because I don't, it probably doesn't make sense for us to go, the last broker responsibility working group did this, and then we go and immediately just tear it down and start over.
Yeah.
So in Bob's group, the previous group, did they expand this qualifying? We'll look at these classes from a licensing standpoint, possibly give credit or not?
I think that was discussed. I don't recall what was done on it unless Denise remembers. I don't recall at least a major change on that.
Okay.
No, in looking just now at the rule history, it doesn't look like any changes were ever made to the number of points given for the team management or the other breakdowns as well. I don't think that's been revised in a while.
Okay.
I think most of that came from around 2011 or 2012 from one of the previous working groups where they put in and that was the big change at the end of 2012 where the becoming a broker became a lot more experience based than just being there.
And then the secondary question to that would be, and I may be speaking for everybody else, and if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody here has any issues with the experience qualification, other than maybe it's too low. Certainly not anything on lowering that. If we took from an education standpoint, since everybody still has to take the same qualifying education classes, right? 6 classes. If we just said, hey, you've got to have class A, B, and C classes, or there could be more than 3, but I'm just saying, if you had to have these classes in order to qualify, wouldn't it just be far more simple to level the playing field of education so that every broker in the state has the exact same education?
Are you asking me? That sounds kind of rhetorical, like you're making a point. Or are you asking me to give my personal opinion, or I'm not sure what you're asking?
I think you just did.
Okay.
It seems like, maybe we need to break this down into 2 different things, whether we go from the education and then we go experience and talk about what do we think needs to be done with education and then what do we need to be done with experience, because I think we all keep going back and forth and not really getting a complete answer.
I think it's a great idea, Madam Chair.
I agree.
I agree.
I'm trying to summarize y'all's points up there too, so let me know if that's sort of roughly says, or how would you like me to help y'all understand what y'all discuss. I tried to summarize it slightly up there, if I'm sharing right.
But I do have a question on this, going back to what I said before, and thanks, Chance, for bringing us back to that. But aren't there notes on those meetings? We looked at surveys from around the country, experience and things like that, and how many points, and we had some grid setups. Are those notes not around anywhere that we could review those and see what progress may have been? I would hope that we made some progress. Was made at that time, and put that off to a meeting where we had that information that we could review.
There was a lot done in the previous group. The previous group met 8 times, and Chairman Jones had binders with lives, incredibly organized and industrious person, and had lots of materials on that. And I know a lot of research was done on that. If we go down that path, what we probably need is a little focus, and I can pull up the minutes from the last couple of meetings, and there was a lot discussed and on that too, but probably need some direction or focus on where we want to go on that. If y'all would like, I can pull up the document sort of summarizing what the last group did and what was left and what was pending. If that will help any. This was obviously one of the big issues. I think the last group proposed 7,200 points or something. So there was along these same lines, an increase in experience. I can pull that up if you'd like.
Well, but it was an increase in experience points in a trade-off for time. There were some trade-offs there, that we offered up to be flexible, that we thought would, some people can gain experience a lot quicker than others, and it doesn't take 5 full years, because the way around this for anybody that wants to own a company anyway is to have the company and hire a broker. And so, we're trying to get the people that are responsible to be the ones to look at it. I don't know. I would like to look at those things again. I wish I had kept them all, but did not know that I would be back on this committee again. So,
Yeah. Bob, I know that you are honest about what you do. My brother is that there's a lot of dishonest people that'll just sign off on people's stuff. And that's why I'm trying, you look at all of your stuff. I don't know how we get around it. Like, I've been reading all of these different states' procedures and what they're required. And some say full-time during the last however many years and whatever. I don't even know how you substantiate that, because not everybody's honest. And I don't know how you get around that.
You don't. You just have to hedge the liars.
Yeah.
That's the sad reality.
yeah, I have to accept the weaknesses in the system. And the weakness is that, heck, I think I have a company of full-time people, but, I'm proven a liar almost every day that if they are full-time, boy, I want that full-time job. But
Yeah.
because it's about a third of what I put in. But
after reading everything that these different states do, I just don't want to dumb down our process to meet other people either, because I keep running across stuff over and over in the last several years that between brokers and agents that really aren't doing us any favors, because it's losing our value because they don't know what they're doing. So people put that above all of us. Oh, you don't need a realtor. You don't need anybody to help you, because they don't know what they're doing. And so that's been a little bit of my frustration lately, is just, I don't feel the requirements are high enough.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I would agree with that, especially for the experience side of it. I think we might be heavy on the education side, but for the experience side, I don't think, as it's structured, 3,600 points is enough. And it sounds like the previous working group was thinking that same way as well. I think those points ought to be higher, and that experience ought to be deeper before qualifying somebody to own a company and sponsor other agents.
Inside my brokerage, we literally have a running joke that, because anytime I say, well, have you talked to that person's broker? The response is they are the broker or their own broker. And our running response is, well, of course they are. And so if everything we say, we're just like, well, of course they are. Well, of course they are. And it's always the case that it's this individual broker that doesn't have a clue what the hell they're doing.
Mark?
This is Bill Roth. I'm sorry, I'm unable to get into the video part of it, but I'm listening in on the phone. But and I don't have access to what you're showing on the screen. But my question to the group is that this is being a broker, being part of a brokerage operation, and also trying to develop your brokerage credentials is really not just entering into the license. We have an ongoing process of continuing education, of annual and every 2-year verification of experience. We have experience of it. So in other words, my question to the group is do we need to make it so? I don't want to make it a barrier of entry to become a licensed broker. If you've got an education requirement, if you've got some easily attainable, and when I say easily, I'm not saying without having some effort, but we want to make it available so people can obtain the ability to have a business and to control their business. But we have other avenues to supplement and to verify and to continually create the credentials for these folks. So I would think that we should caution ourselves being too tough in dealing with this. And the other thing I would also suggest, and I find myself questioning this myself a lot too. I don't think we need to deal with the lowest common denominator. I think that yes, there's going to be bad people in every organization, in every group, but I think we have to legislate to what generally is the mean. We shouldn't be legislating for the 1% of the bad guys, and penalize the 99% of the good guys who want to be in this business, because we also do have, again, checks and balances on that. There are verifications, there are punishments, there's penalties, there's other methods to do that. So I think our task is not to make it tough for people, but to make sure that we're giving people the ability to obtain reasonable skills, reasonable experiences, so that they can participate in this. And again, I'm a commercial guy. I've never sold a house, and I'm never going to sell a house. But I'll tell you something, I've done hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate transactions. And so, and there's a lot of people in the business that have a lot of experience, but maybe don't have the same experience that everybody has. The other thing, the last part, and I'm sorry to be so much, but the other thing I would suggest is that there is a whole group of folks that are coming into business now as second careers, as retired careers, as people that aren't college bound or that are transfers into our community. And there's a lot of real good experienced people out there who have tremendous skills and talents from their previous experiences as business people, managers, teachers, whatever work they've done. They've got a lot of skills that come to the table that would benefit a manager, a broker, a technical person. So part of being a broker is being in the real estate business, but a large part of what we do is managing, looking for issues, trying to identify problem and solving problems. So I would caution the group that, that we got to sort of make sure that people can utilize the skills that they have and allow us to and get them into the business because they could benefit us all. And with that, that's sort of my general comments. I don't know if it's helpful or not.
Hey, Bill, I just had, you can't see my screen, so I was trying to summarize what you were saying. I don't want to misquote you. You were talking about barriers to entry. You could use lowering education as a possible trade-off for experience. And one of the main things you're talking about is a common theme across all our committees and occupations is a lot of times these groups we're looking to set minimum competency requirements. And so you don't want, as you were saying, the bottom percent or the lowest common denominator to sort of drive everything. And there's also the thing we look at is best practices as opposed to minimum competency, which the regulator is normally going to focus more on the minimum competency requirements and not try to get too much into how to do the business, since we leave that to the professionals. And then you also pointed out that if we have, I think, a barrier to entry, that you might be excluding people with other relevant job experiences. So I hope I didn't misquote you any there.
No, I think that's good. And the last thing is that we do have checks and balances in the profession. And so that walking through the front door is not the ultimate deal. Even if you get a guy who's maybe not particularly competent or has all these skills or has all the experience, there's ways to check and balance that person down the road if they fail, if they don't succeed, if they don't sort of live up to the standards. And we can sort of, regulate our group through the successive continuing education and licensing requirements and other things. So again, that was the one thing I think that maybe you missed on my list is that we do have checks and balances that would allow us to maybe have an easier barrier of entry, but because we have the ability to advance, enhance, and verify activity, as that person is actually active in that position.
So, Madam Chair, if we're going to go back to the discussion of splitting education and experience.
Okay.
Talking about education, I just think that we should have a level playing field for everybody, regardless of whether or not you have a college degree. Because like we were talking about earlier, the college degree could be, in education. It could be it could be in business, and like me, you've never talked about real estate in your business school. So, we all have the same qualifying education to get a license. I think we should all have the same qualifying education to get a broker's license.
And along those lines, it makes me think of the apprentice program for the salesperson's license. Maybe there's an opportunity to consider an apprentice program for a broker's license as
BAE instead of an SAE.
Mm-hmm.
Say that again, Chance?
A BAE instead of an SAE.
Something along those lines, yeah. So you create a standard to get that apprentice broker's license, and then a 2-year program to complete the education and experience under mentorship.
Would a broker be willing to have an apprentice if they know that apprentice is going to want to go off and do their own thing?
I don't think so, but I don't think that that's necessarily what we're talking about. I think it looks a lot like SAE, where you can take the salesperson's license, but then you have a certain amount of additional, instead of 17 hours of, instead of 18 hours of continuing education for your next renewal, you have 138. Because you're going to take 4 30-hour classes plus your broker responsibility course, your legal update, non-legal update 2, something along those lines. Similar to what we do with SAE.
Do we really need, do we really need that amount of classes, kind of like what Chance is saying? Like, why can't we just have like a core related to only real estate classes and do away with the 630 hours that?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Nothing to do. and then add kind of what we're talking about, either a mentorship or more experience. It has to be an equal playing field.
So right now, everybody's got to take the real estate brokerage class, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a requirement. And then you could get, you could literally get your 630 hours, whatever that number is, doing 2-hour lunch and learn. So you don't learn crap, but you got a free lunch out of it. So why don't we make it intentional education? It's going to be applicable to a broker's job, whether they sponsor people or not.
Correct, like things like contracts or like knowing an Alta, the stuff that is very, it could be all commercial related for somebody.
A lot like the GRI.
Yes.
Finance class, you have a marketing class, you have a management class, you have a contracts, some lines.
Yeah.
Very similar to what the GRI is.
Why not substitute this bachelor's requirement with GRI requirements?
Possibility.
I don't know how that would work. Chelsea, if somebody have to comment on that. Creating a designation requirement, I don't know.
Or at least like that type of focus classes.
Yeah, because I happen to have Champions Real Estate or Champions School of Real Estate pulled up in front of me right now. And those types of classes are all offered. There's a real estate finance class, there's a real estate contracts class, we have the contract. It just seems like we had those applicable classes instead of an arbitrary number of hours. That's appropriate for being a broker.
And I think that should probably apply to just regular real estate licenses also.
Outside our scope.
Like specific courses that are actually going to give them the education and the interaction of speaking about real estate. You said I have a finance degree and I didn't learn anything about real estate with it, but I used all my classes for it. But I had no idea what any of it was.
They got fired from selling advertising. I was doing too much real estate on the side.
What does everybody else think?
I don't think we're going to solve it today.
Why not? Just kidding.
I really like brainstorming and idea dump down. And I think as Mark's capturing those notes over the next couple of weeks, I would like to take the opportunity just to kind of process that. And then, much like this fellow wrote his letter to us, maybe be able to put some of my thoughts down in writing and then submit that back to Mark and as well as other people as well. Then when we come back together, we'll have some sort of maybe more focused plan or be able to come up with a more focused plan and recommendation.
If I may, this is Jennifer Wheeler. I'm the Director of Education and Exams, and I just joined the group a little late. I apologize. I just wanted to put a couple of things out there for your consideration. In reference to the GRI courses, those are proprietary to Texas Realtors. So any requirement to use their courses would likely be considered preferential, and I think we might have issue with that. However, I think the discussion of reducing the hours and mandating specific qualifying courses is a really good direction to go. And I also think that this group might be served well in working with a subcommittee of the ESAC, excuse me, in a joint effort on this front, if you think that's appropriate.
I think before we talk about going to a with the ESAC subcommittee, we sort of need to know where our stance is, where we're starting at. before we
And
go
I
and work with
And I
them.
can add a little bit too on the jurisdiction side, because sometimes with committees you have overlapping jurisdiction. As I understood it, this group is focused more on becoming a brokerage, so the licensing part, and we get into continuing education, and SAE or BA is sort of a hybrid. But when you get into continuing education, what you need on a renewal, that's traditionally considered more of the education committee. I could see some overlap though on the sort of 2-year apprenticeship. I think that's really is under both committees' jurisdiction in a way, if y'all go that route.
Okay.
And I am hearing some consensus on obviously streamline or lower education and increase experience. That could be a trade-off where you could say that's not a barrier to entry because we're actually lowering it here, and then so we're corresponding and making it more targeted here. So you have a good argument on that. But yeah, the ESAC thing, if you go down the continuing education route, is a real good point.
May I interject just for a moment? In my opinion, it's the experience overall. From what I've experienced, is the experience of brokers and agents, or agents becoming brokers, that's more viable than the education. They tend to, if they have a grasp of the business, because what you learn in the classroom is applicable, but it's not on the daily. It's not the problem solving side of things. So to me, in becoming a broker, the experience would weigh more than the education once you're at that point.
That kind of goes back to the email that we got, because she was wanting to get more credit for supervising and maybe possibly the number of agents that she has supervised over the years too. 'Cause I know that happens a lot in the bigger brokerages. So.
It does. And that experience is viable for becoming a broker. That's something that you need to know. You need to know that side of the business as you're moving into your broker's license.
I agree.
The other issue, and just to sort of jump onto that wagon that everybody's talking about, is that the education of the real estate, part of it is a moving target. It changes, it advances. It's something that's a viable and an ongoing deal, and that's something that can be learned by a book. But I think that there's the experience level and the abilities of people to bring talents to the industry is, I think, what is very valuable and something that we want to encourage. And to the extent that somebody can get all the requirements through, and I'm not saying it derogatorily, through book learning or through the education process, I think that's a viable way of getting licensed. But to the extent that we can encourage people to also contribute their experiences, I think is a real great opportunity for us to expand our good folks to be in this industry. And so I sort of like the idea of making it, trading off. Not saying it's one or it's exclusive to one or the other, but to work out some kind of a melding or a joint or combination opportunity, so people can really take advantage of their abilities to get into this.
I agree.
I agree.
How do we quantify that?
I apologize. I'm not educated up on all the legal stuff and all the rules and regulations, and maybe I should do more studying. But is there some kind of a cheat sheet you could? Maybe you've already given it to us, and I just hadn't printed it out. But is there a cheat sheet that basically says what are the sort of requirements that we could maybe create a template to say, could we add to that, create another column or get some basic background? I mean, a lot of y'all are more experienced and have a lot more information on this stuff than maybe I do, and maybe I got to catch up on what the rules are. But it might be helpful for us to look at what we've got and then say what are some alternatives that we could add to it that it would maybe help me sort of evaluate things a little bit different. If and I may be behind the curve, you all may already be there and know that, but if there's other folks in the group that need to get caught up, maybe I'd like to encourage us to get some staff to help us do that.
Yes, we can help on that. Are you talking about more of the requirements to become a broker, like the sort of experience requirements and that sort of chart?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we do have that. I'll forward that to you. In fact, yeah, there was an email that could probably, I'll give you the date and time that might.
I mean, we're getting a lot of stuff, but
Oh yeah.
There's hundreds of pages of stuff to read, and
Yep.
if we're going to sort of get focused on a particular issue, maybe we need to have some more directed, stuff to look at before the particular meeting.
On this issue, it's a July 1 email at 1:58 p.m. It provides some of this information that could get you some of the detail, and actually a lot of it was new to me too, because I hadn't jumped into this in very much depth. And on the website, the Become an Individual Real Estate Broker is really lays it out really nicely. At least it did for me, on how to get some of that. And the other big document that I found super helpful was the application for the supplement of qualifying experience, which I link in that email, and it breaks out all the charts that like Brian and Chance and some of the others were referring to, all those different breakout. Like I didn't know you got 20 points for being a team lead, or whatever it was on that.
Right, and I don't know any of that stuff either. So, are there other folks in the group that would benefit by having sort of an education session where we all get caught up to speed, or am I sort of behind the curve and I'll have to catch up on my own, which I'm willing to do? I assume that the silence is deafening. That means that everybody knows everything, so that's okay. I'll catch up on my own then.
Yeah. And nobody's making any faces. I can assure you that.
So are we tabling this for now and want to come back to it, or what is it we want to do? Kind of get our thoughts together?
I mean, I kind of like Brian's idea of going back and let's just take a look at this, and maybe everybody coming up with, I don't know, their idea of what this might look like moving forward. I mean, I hate to have 7 or 8 competing ideas on the table, but I think if everybody kind of had something of what the education piece looks like, and the experience pieces look like, we could probably come to a fairly happy medium pretty quick.
I think there's 3 ideas. It kind of boils down into 3 ideas. One is, shall we take a look at the experience points required to become a broker? The second main category is the education requirements and all of the things that we've talked about in that, particularly the bachelor's degree, or Chance, your ideas about very specific and targeted education. So that's all one group. And then the third group is the idea of the mentorship, broker mentorship program. So I think the way I see it, I think we have 3 areas of conversation and thought processes.
If that's being shared on the screen, does that capture it accurately?
Yes.
Yes.
So can we all put kind of our thoughts before the next meeting on an email that we can maybe send to Mark, and we can all look at? The way, we can process everybody's ideas on those 3 points, and then when we come to the next meeting, we're not discussing all of them for the first time?
I'm great with that.
That's good.
I am too.
Yeah. And just so you can't share that. It would have to be with staff and then through an open meeting when we actually discuss it. So there'd be no, other than y'all can have individual conversations, but we wouldn't share this. Are you talking about Yasmin? You said send it to me?
Yes.
Okay.
You could do it as materials, Mark.
Absolutely as materials. Yeah.
Yes.
But you would have it ahead of time that way.
Yeah.
So to make sure I understand, we're just going to send this directly to you, Mark.
Yeah. So send thoughts. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Send thoughts.
Quick question about the word mentorship. And I mean, we've talked about 2 types of mentorship, and that's one where we mentor agents that are under the brokerage, and and mentorship of potential brokers by other brokers. And we're talking about the number 3 is referring to the latter, right? Mentoring brokers.
Yes.
Bob, I think what it refers to is a prospective broker applicant goes through an apprentice program, much like a salesperson does. And maybe it's more apprenticeship than it is mentorship.
So again, Mark, if you would bring if you could look and see if all the notes on the the mentorship program that we tried to design last year, that would be great too.
Yes, and that I know that's in some of the materials as well.
Are we gonna give ourselves a deadline to have our thoughts sent to Mark, or not?
When is the next meeting?
Not later than July 9th. Okay. Just kidding.
I was like, wait, what?
The next meeting's not till October.
Yeah, that's later. You could meet in September if you wish as well, or earlier, but August is kind of tough for us because of all the commission meeting stuff going on, but we could schedule in September. Normally our groups meet quarterly, but this group's a little different, so the monthly is definitely a possibility as well.
I would like to meet again in September if that's possible. I don't want to wait another 3 months.
Yeah,
Me too.
I agree.
I agree.
Agreed.
Fine with me.
So did y'all want a deadline though on the materials, assuming, I guess you want to know when the next meeting is before you do it. You could say something like 20 days before the next meeting or something like that. We try to post our materials about 10 days before the meeting. So if you got it to me within 20, and then really it's just a matter of compiling it. Just keep in mind that your emails are public records. So don't slam each other in those emails. But yeah, how about would 20 days before the next meeting be okay? Or I mean, it's not, no one's going to come down on you if you do it at 15 days, but it would be helpful to us to get it by a certain time.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And Mark, are you planning on sending them as you get them, or are you gonna keep them and send them all together?
It'd have to be part of the public material, so it'd be at the 10-day mark is when they'd all go up.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So when in September?
What's the meeting in September?
Well, Leslie, are you ready to move from this agenda item or not? I wasn't sure yet, because obviously that's later items. I mean, we could jump to 10 because the other stuff was, well, there was one other comment. I think number 9 we'd have to address as well. The other things, just we put this together sort of placeholders because a lot of these items overlap a bit, so we wanted to give notice on the agenda that we might talk about other things. So I just want to make sure what agenda item we're on right now, because I think we're still on the experience and education.
Lose Leslie?
Yeah, that's one. Let me check participants. All right. Okay, vice chair.
Yes.
I think you can decide whether we are on this agenda item or we're done with this, and then we move on probably to number 9, but not positive. Let me put the agenda up on the screen, and
Okay.
or actually, I guess the document I had was fine because it helps us the agenda. So, because it looks like you have the action plan here, at least for agenda item 5, that you have a plan.
Uh-huh.
And I'll
Covers 5 and
forward
6.
this doc to y'all as well.
Okay.
Okay, so number 9, we had one comment that if Pam, if you'd like to move to number 9, I could
Yeah.
help set that.
Okay, if you can
On
do that.
number 9, we did get one email. It's probably more appropriate for the education committee. So y'all would have a couple options. One, you could address it yourself. 2, you could look at it, make a recommendation, ESAC, or you could just refer it to them. I'll pull it up. It's page 10 of the meeting material. So let me go to that. So that's when it's email that went to Commissioner Russell, who is with us now, and it was addressed to the broker sponsor working group. Like I said, it's really more continuing education, and I think I may have even summarized the email some in another area that might be helpful. Let me see if I can pull that up. And I'll go ahead and pull up my my summary then, so y'all can see it, because it took me a few reads to get there. Let's see. So he was talking about perhaps doing a different course, because obviously most brokers and agents do residential real estate, and then of course the commercial brokers, farm and ranch, a lot of other people will understandably say, hey, that course is geared for things that don't have anything to do with my practice. So that was one of his points, and he pointed out a specific course that he takes that's very relevant to his practice. He also talked about whether to change the 2-year requirement to take broker responsibility to 4 years or 6 years or some other period. And then he also talked about sort of saying, hey, look, if you meet these requirements of 10 plus years as a broker, less agents, then maybe you can have some other options. So these are all certainly valid points. It seemed to me when reading it, it was probably more appropriate for the education committee because it was continuing education, but y'all are brokers, and this does relate certainly to somewhat to broker responsibility. So y'all could address it if you want, but I just thought the other committee might fit them a little better.
So moved.
Yes.
I agree.
I agree.
I have included that email in their materials already, so it is with them as well. I just did it with both because I wasn't sure what y'all would want to do on that. So, all right, you can consider that. Unless y'all have any other instructions for me, that's taken care of.
Okay.
Well, this is Bill. With regard to that particular letter, I think there's some real interesting comments in there that maybe the group we should be thinking about as we're deliberating on stuff down the road. Is that there is really there's some value in experience. There should be some benefit to having long-term experiences, and there should be a diversity of education requirements or abilities so that we can get credit for doing stuff that may be related to our particular disciplines within the real estate community. And I think we have to sort of credit folks that do have some experience in the business for a while. I'm not saying that we allow people a free ride, but that we do think about that, and the education committee maybe really should take this at heart. I think there's some really valid points in this guy's letter.
So what I put on the screen, Bill, is I said the consensus is to give it to ESAC, but consider this group should consider the good meaning the broker responsibility working group should consider the many good points made in that email going forward as well. Is that about right?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much.
Also, Leslie did text me and said her computer froze and she's trying to get back on. So I think she'll be thrilled if we solve everything in the meantime.
Yeah.
Right. So back with you, Pamela. Is there anything else on this agenda item on number 9? We could probably move on to the 10 and 11.
But I just have one quick comment on number 9. I mean, so basically, he just doesn't think the broker responsibility course applies to him. Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Correct, or it's too frequent, or one, it doesn't fit his practice, and gee, do I need it every 2 years? And when I don't sponsor anybody, or only sponsor 5 agents or 10 agents, and could there be extra criteria on that? So
I don't know the gentleman, but I know he's been around long enough, based on what he's saying, that maybe he's remembering that in 1972, I think it was the year that they grandfathered every broker never to have education ever again. And I don't think that worked out. And luckily, most of those people are not there anymore. So I believe that was the year. So
I think so.
My guess is that he's addressing the fact that there may not be new information that's relevant that frequently related to the requirements. And so that it's not that it's not necessary, but it's got to be relevant. And so if there is changes in the responsibility requirements, if there is information that really needs to be imparted to people, that's new information, I think that's what he's trying to get at, is that it seems like we may be rehashing every 2 years basically the same stuff that we had the previous 2 years. Now, your point, though, is that maybe it's a good thing to remind people and to get refreshed on the existing stuff. But I think what he's saying is that if you know it, we don't need to be learn it every 2 years if there's no new information. And I think that's what he's questioning, is whether.
And I understand, and not to go back to that, lowest common denominator example, because that's not what this is. But you can't. How do you know whether they know it without giving it to them? You don't know who does and who doesn't. And I don't think our state agency is in the position of giving everyone a test before we assign their education for their 2-year renewal. So it's, it has to somehow be consistent.
I agree with you. I think, and I didn't make myself clear, but I think what he's just saying is that if you've already gotten a certain amount of information, if there's new information, we should be passing it on. But if you've already learned it once, you don't have to keep learning it over and over, the same thing over and over again. But I agree with you. You need to. It's up to the person to figure out if they know it or not.
Right.
One really good point I wanted to comment on, although we do this for a living, we work for the regulatory agency. I mean, I know about as much, what you know in your pinky is as much as I know in my whole body about real estate. Y'all do this every day. Your knowledge is way expanded. Even people who are former brokers and agents, if they're working here full time, they're going to lack your current knowledge on things too. So y'all know a lot more, and it is hard for us staff to make y'all perfect or great, because we don't do this every day like y'all do. So that's always the balance on education, and it's hard for us to judge it sometimes, not being out there like y'all are. Well, Leslie is back on, I think, as
I
well.
am back on.
Okay.
And where we are, we were on to number 9. The comment we have the screen on the comment that Mr. Schneider did, and it was decided to refer that to ESAC, but to keep in mind is the good points that he's making, because that is related to a lot of what y'all are doing.
Okay.
And if y'all are done with that, it might be good to go to, I guess, Leslie, if you're ready for agenda item 10 or 11, which was the future meeting agenda items. And I think what I heard is obviously this issue again, the education experience requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And did y'all want me to leave these sort of placeholders up there so that you can sort of move around on these different topics? Because that will help on the open meeting side.
Yes. Please.
Yes.
I think that would be great.
Okay. And then,
Did we discuss when we want to meet again?
that's it, number 11. So now's a good time. I don't know when you dropped out, but they had mentioned the group wanted to meet in September, which is Amber can help us with dates on that and when we have availability.
Yeah, so I was looking at the calendar, and if you all want to keep meeting on Wednesday, there's Wednesday, September 2nd or Wednesday, September 9th. And if you meet that early, then you could still, if you need to meet in October, then you could still meet at the suggested date that's there on the agenda, the October 14th. Or if you need to meet later in September, I think pretty much all the weeks are open, so it's up to y'all.
May I say that the first week of September is the Texas Realtor Convention, even though it's going to be online. So my suggestion would be the 9th.
I'm okay with that.
I agree.
I cannot attend.
Ninth would work. 9th would be great. We're still going to be in the afternoons.
It's up to y'all. Sometimes we have meetings that start at 10, so if you all think you might need to meet longer, you could start earlier, or, you know, the 1 o'clock is fine.
I won't be able to attend on the 9th, but I can submit a proposal. If it works for everybody else, don't change on account of me.
Is anybody going to attend the conference on the 2nd on this group? You all? Okay.
Yes,
It's going to be a virtual conference, but
it's virtual.
but I will need to attend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so September 9th at 1 p.m. is good with most.
Good for me.
Yes.
It's good for me.
And then those October dates we had work really. Why we suggested those dates is that works really good in conjunction with the quarterly commission schedule. So there's like a little window there where those things just kind of work out really good. So if any of those dates are good with y'all, or if the October 14th one is good, we can schedule that as well. It doesn't have to be at 10, it could be at 1 p.m. or whatever time y'all want.
14th is good for me.
And did y'all want 1 p.m. again, or 10 a.m. or whatever time?
1 is good.
One.
And let's see. So basically, Leslie, unless you have something else, you can tell me what y'all wish to do now.
Are y'all ready to adjourn, or does anybody have anything else? I take it there's nothing else. Okay, so the meeting stands adjourned. It is 2:12 p.m.
Thank y'all. Have a good day.
Hey,
And remember, gotta do this. All right. All right.
hey, Mark, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Unrelated to anything discussed here, I just want to make sure that I'm not violating Open Meetings Act if I do this. If I wanted to go and talk to Rita Santa